Run your hand across any table near you. Feel how smooth it is, how clean. Now imagine scrubbing that table with sand and lye at 4 in the morning, in the dark while the castle sleeps above you. Because that was your life, not for a week or a month, but for years, possibly forever. If you were a servant in a medieval castle, nobody remembered your name. But without you, nothing worked. Subscribe and stick around. A large English medieval castle might employ 50 people or more: cooks, grooms, carpenters, falconers, musicians, knights, crossbow operators. At any given time, anywhere from a few dozen to a few hundred people lived and worked inside those walls. It was a self-contained village, a fortress and a workplace and a home all compressed into stone. And beneath all of them, the servants who did the work nobody wanted to talk about. You need to understand the hierarchy first, because in a medieval castle, your position wasn't just a job, it was your entire identity. At the top sat the steward. He ran the estate, managed the finances, supervised every member of staff. He answered only to the Lord himself. Below the steward, the chamberlain. He controlled the Lord's private chambers, his clothing, his treasury. He was the last face the Lord saw before sleep. The marshal oversaw the stables, the horses, the military discipline. Knights reported to him, grooms feared him. These weren't servants in the way we think of the word. They were administrators, power brokers. Some held land and influence nearly equal to minor nobles. But keep going down the ladder, past the cook, past the butler, past the chambermaids. At the very bottom, you find the scullion. The scullion was the first person awake in the entire castle, before dawn, before the cook, before the Lord's chamberlain. Your first task was lighting every fire in the kitchen, then hauling water, then scrubbing the floors on your hands and knees with lye. You scoured pots with sand until your fingers cracked and bled. You swept out the fireplace. You cleaned up after the other servants. In 1386, when Parliament asked King Richard II to dismiss certain ministers, he famously replied that he would not remove so much as a scullion from his kitchen at Parliament's request. Even the king knew who was at the bottom, and the scullion knew it too. There was no pretending otherwise. Your rank was visible in what you ate, where you slept, and how people spoke to you. The kitchen itself was chaos, smoky, deafeningly loud, dangerously hot. Open flames roared beneath massive iron cauldrons. Grease spattered across stone floors already slick with animal fat. The cook commanded everything from the center of this inferno. Below him, undercooks chopped and stirred without pause. The quistron turned the spit, rotating whole animals over the fire for hours. The rôtissier prepared roasted meats. The dresser arranged food on serving platters. The cupbearer tasted every drink before it reached the Lord's lips. If the wine was poisoned, the cupbearer died first. That was the job. Kitchens were often housed in separate buildings to reduce the risk of fire. A single spark in the wrong place could destroy the entire castle. And the food operation was enormous. A large castle might have over 150 people involved in cooking and preparation alone. Bread, ale, stews, roasted meats, pies, everything seasoned with expensive spices like cinnamon, pepper, and mace. But the servants didn't eat what the Lord ate. The best food went to the high table, then to the knights, then to the senior staff. Whatever remained went to the rest. Seating in the great hall reflected your exact position in the hierarchy. The closer you sat to the Lord, the more you mattered. The servants ate furthest from the high table, sometimes not in the hall at all. Now think about where you slept. If you were lucky, you had a straw pallet, a mat of woven rushes or a sack stuffed with straw, laid on the stone floor. Nobody was assigned a sleeping spot. It was first come, first served. If you were important enough, you got a place near the fire. If the Lord had a personal servant, that person might sleep on a pallet at the foot of the Lord's own bed, or in a small antechamber off the private quarters. Everyone else found whatever space they could, under stairwells on the kitchen floor, on top of trestle tables after they'd been cleared from supper. Some servants slept in lean-to buildings in the bailey exposed to rain and wind. If not near the fire, you slept on the cold stone floor at the far end of the hall, with nothing but your cloak for warmth, shivering and pressing closer to the nearest body you could find. Most domestic servants slept in shared chambers in the cellars or attics. Men in one room, women in another. No privacy, no personal space. The floors of the great hall were covered in rushes. These served as both carpet and air freshener. Herbs like lavender and mint were scattered through them. But between the herb changes, the rushes accumulated everything: food scraps, spilled ale, dog excrement, fleas, lice, rat droppings. Some castles replaced the rushes monthly, some seasonally, some only once a year. And you slept in them. The chambermaids had their own daily ordeal up before the household woke. Sweep every floor, clean out the basins, replace the water, empty the chamber pots, every single one. Make the beds if the mattress was infested with lice or bed bugs, which it often was. The maid had to unstuff it, have the casing cleaned, and restuff it with fresh straw. If the tapestries needed cleaning, she carried them outside and beat the dust and grime out of them by hand. Those tapestries could weigh more than she did. Then there were the laundresses. Laundry was grueling physical labor. They hauled water from the well, scrubbed linens in cold troughs with lye soap, made from wood ash and animal fat. Their hands were raw, cracked, and permanently reddened. Clean linen symbolized nobility. The whiter the cloth, the higher the status, which meant the laundress's suffering was directly tied to her lord's reputation. And then there were the jobs nobody ever wanted. The gong farmer, his job was to clean out the cesspits beneath the castle's garderobes, the toilets. These were built into the outer walls. Waste drop-down chutes into pits below, or sometimes directly into the moat. The name garderobe literally means wardrobe in French. Nobles stored clothing near the toilets because they believed the ammonia from human waste repelled lice and fleas. That tells you everything about what life smelled like. The gong farmer emptied those pits by hand. At night, the stench was indescribable. Some castles let waste fall into flowing water. Others had moats that doubled as open sewers. The smell around a medieval castle was nothing like what you imagine. Flea and rat-infested rushes, unwashed bodies, smoking torches, kitchen grease, stable manure, garderobe stench, all of it layered together inside stone walls with poor ventilation. The nobles carried pomanders, small balls of scented herbs, to hold near their noses. The servants just breathed it in. Now think about the cold. Stone walls, stone floors, arrow-slit windows with no glass, just wooden shutters or oiled animal skins stretched across the opening. In winter, the cold was brutal. The nobles had four-poster beds draped with heavy curtains and fur blankets. Servants placed heated stones wrapped in cloth beneath the sheets. Tapestries lined the walls to block the worst of the drafts. The servants themselves had none of this. A rough woolen blanket if they were fortunate. Their own cloak if they weren't. No heated stones, no curtains, just cold stone beneath you and cold air above. Shivering on a stone floor in the dark, inching closer to the nearest sleeping body for warmth. That was a normal winter night for most of the people who kept the castle running. Payment depended entirely on your position. High-ranking servants like the steward or chamberlain earned real wages. Some received rooms of their own, clothing allowances, even grants of land. The lowest servants, the scullions, the laundresses, the gong farmers received almost nothing, sometimes just food and a place to sleep. Most were paid by the day, and when the lord traveled away from the castle, staff was cut. Instead of 3 laundry maids, only 1 would stay. Job security was a fantasy for anyone below the senior staff. Discipline was harsh. Stealing meant dismissal or whipping. Shirking duties brought public humiliation. The marshal was often in charge of punishment. Corporal punishment of servants was considered normal and expected. It remained legal in many parts of Europe for centuries. And when you got sick, there was nothing. Nobles might summon a physician or at least the castle chaplain. Servants worked until they couldn't. Dysentery, infections, fevers swept through the close quarters. Lice and fleas carried disease from body to body if you couldn't work. You could be replaced. But the castle also offered something the outside world often couldn't: security. Outside the keep, more servants worked in buildings scattered around the bailey. Herdsmen, mill workers, woodcutters, rope makers, candle makers, potters, basket weavers, and spinners. The stable was its own small kingdom. Grooms rose before dawn to feed and water the horses. They mucked out stalls, groomed coats, cleaned hooves, repaired tack. Horses were essential for war, travel, and hunting. A lame horse could mean a dead night. A servant inside castle walls was fed, sheltered, protected from bandits and war. In a world where famine and violence were constant threats that mattered more than comfort. And for some, there was real opportunity. A skilled cook was worth his weight in silver. A trusted chamberlain could become a close advisor to the Lord. Henry VIII's cook was sometimes woken in the middle of the night because the king wanted a midnight snack. That cook was indispensable. Pages were different entirely. A page was a young noble boy, around 7 years old, sent to serve another lord's household. He carried messages, tidied the lord's quarters, served meals at the high table. He slept in a small chamber off the lord's bedroom, or sometimes at the foot of the bed itself. He received no wages. His payment was education, learning the manners and management of a castle from the inside, preparing him to one day run his own household. The lady's maid worked closest to the noblewoman. She dressed her mistress, attended her everywhere, managed her private chamber. Though her wages were modest, proximity to the lady could make her a confidante. In a world where information was power, that closeness had real value. But for most servants, life was repetitive, physical, and invisible. Dawn to dusk every day, no weekends, no holidays except the saints' days. And even then, the fires still needed lighting, and the animals still needed feeding. Sweeping floors that would be dirty again by evening. Hauling water that would be used and gone within the hour. Carrying firewood up spiral staircases so narrow your shoulders brushed both walls. Lighting fires that would burn down to ash by morning. Scrubbing pots that would be blackened again by supper. And at the end of it, you lay down on a straw mat in a shared room, pulled a rough blanket over your shoulders, and did it all again tomorrow. The castle was a machine, and the servants were the parts that wore out. Every meal served on time, every chamber cleaned, every horse groomed, every fire lit, all of it made possible by people whose names were never recorded. A microcosm of medieval society itself, unequal, ordered, and utterly dependent on the work of many for the comfort of the few. Next time you walk through a castle, look past the great hall and the Lord's chamber. Look at the kitchens, the cellars, the narrow servant stairways worn smooth by thousands of feet over hundreds of years. Those were the real rooms where the castle lived, where the work was done, where the fires were lit before dawn and the pots were scrubbed after dark. If this kept you watching, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.